when I moved to Los Angeles, I was very determined. I was determined to do whatever it took to survive and succeed playing music. And so in that moment, while my feelings were maybe a little bit hurt, I realized this is what I need to do to succeed in this moment, and I'm going to rise.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Cal Poly music students, faculty, staff, anyone who's come across this podcast. My name is Henry Lee. I will be your host for CPP Music Couches. CPP Music Couches is where we interview the Cal Poly Pomona community. It includes like students, faculty, and members. Today we have Tom Luer. He is a saxophonist and instructor at Cal Poly Pomona.
The following interview was recorded live November 18th, 2020.
Tom, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. I've been on the faculty at Cal Poly since 2006. Seems like a long time ago at this point.
That's
But
a while.
it is a while, yeah. I was sort of reflecting on that recently with some of my other students. But primarily at Cal Poly, what I've done for most of those years is taught saxophone lessons and jazz history. Filled in a few times directing the Cal Poly Jazz Ensemble when Dr. Copland would be on sabbatical. A few years ago, well, maybe more like 5 years ago or 4 or 5 years ago, I started sort of taking on more classes as the need arose for part-time faculty to take on some more courses. And then I guess 2 years ago now, the former saxophone professor, Lori Huff, she retired from the department, and I took over the duties of teaching the entire saxophone studio and a couple of other classes that she taught at that time. So right now my classes include, in addition to jazz and classical saxophone, I also direct the saxophone ensemble. I teach classes in music appreciation, the history of technology and music, still jazz history, a couple different levels of jazz improv. And I'm also currently directing in cyberspace here, not only the saxophone ensemble, but also the jazz ensemble, as Dr. Copland was once again on sabbatical this fall semester, and I'll be doing it for him again in the spring this year. So I'm sort of like a jack of all trades, but my area of specialty is really the saxophone and jazz.
Yes, it's a lot of jazz and saxophone that
Yeah.
I'm hearing.
So I spent most of my entire life doing so far.
That's great. The first question that I usually ask every guest on this podcast: how is quarantine going for you?
Well, I think that I have mixed feelings about it, probably like everybody does. I mean, um, I I don't mind working from home, and I'm married, and my wife is working from home, so it's we certainly get to see each other a lot more than we would in our normal work schedules. I don't live really close to Cal Poly, so once I'm there for the day, I'm there, and sometimes I put in very long days. So it's nice to not have the commute. So for those reasons, I'm doing okay with it. Um, but I'm a social person, and while I completely 100% abiding by all of the social distancing and masking uh, uh, requirements of us, I really long for being back out there, seeing friends and family, and I still perform quite a bit, and I've missed that. I haven't really played any gigs, so to speak of, since February, or March, I guess. So it's a little lonely in that sense. But and also, the learning part of it here provides its challenges as well.
Yes, everything's like a challenge with like COVID, which we've all been like seeing. Just like trying to like adjust to like living life normally as possible during COVID, but it's still not normal.
No, no, it's not. You have to try to do what you can to replicate things. I still occasionally will try to do just Zoom hangs with friends or FaceTime calls just to see people's faces. Um, Over the summer, I was hosting little jazz listening parties on Zoom where I would be spinning some of my old jazz vinyl records for friends and just, enjoying doing that as well to try to be social in any way that I could. But the longer this goes on, it feels like you would think your motivation to do those things would increase, but it's almost like it's sort of wearing you down. So I sometimes find myself engaging in those things a little less frequently, but I think it's important for all of us to try to do whatever you can in the interest of still maintaining community with those you might normally be around if we were there in the same space together. It's good for our health to do that.
Yes, you mentioned that you do like jazz listening parties with like vinyl. I'm a record collector myself.
Oh, great.
Yes, I only have like a few jazz records though.
Well, I used to have a lot more, and I thinned it out over the years. But my collection got down to the stuff that really mattered to me, and then in recent years, I started picking up other things that that I had always wanted, or new things I discovered would really matter to me. And my collection is definitely skewed towards saxophonists. So it's a sort of a collection that only myself or maybe my saxophone buddies might really appreciate. But it's not very big, but it's got some great music in it, I'm glad that I have a way to enjoy it and share it with others when I can. So
Having like music that's like pertains to like you specifically, it's definitely like special in a way.
yeah, and I think for a lot of people, not even just musicians, but I think a lot of people in general tend to find something in the music they like that they feel sort of is a representation of who they are, So you get very passionate about the artists you like to listen to. A lot of people who aren't musicians feel that way about it, and certainly musicians we do as well. It becomes almost like an extension of who you are because you feel like your uh, your interest in that is because there's something that you relate to in it. It's part of you in a way. We connect to it. So yeah.
Nice. One more question about quarantine. Have you picked up any new hobbies?
Well, yeah, I have. I mean, I'm not really exploring all those hobbies to their fullest, but like I kind of developed a few more handyman skills than I had before. I bought a few power tools that I didn't own before, and did some little projects around the house, and I was inspired by my father. My father is he's a jack of all trades. He's retired now, but he's from that generation of people who from the Midwest who grew up on a farm could fix anything wrong with a car, put up drywall, and do the plumbing. Like he could just do anything, and he still does. He still builds like pieces of furniture for family and friends and unique projects. And so I had mentioned to him early this year that I was interested in maybe talking to him about building me a display board for all of these mouthpieces that I have for the saxophone, and so I could keep it in my office at Cal Poly, and those would be mouthpieces that my students could test out, to get a better idea if they were going to buy a new mouthpiece and a better mouthpiece. They could have it to check out and see if they liked it before they bought one themselves, or maybe just to borrow them for periods of time. So anyway, he finds this gorgeous piece of olive wood, makes this mouthpiece display board, and I was like, wow, that's the coolest thing. And I thought at some point here a couple months ago, I thought, well, maybe I could make one of those. And so I started to figure out what tools I could get for it. And so far, I've made about a half a dozen of them, and it's kind of fun. It's tapping into this a little part of me that enjoys, like building things, which I don't really normally allow myself a lot of time to do because I am so busy teaching and playing and performing music. So
It's like father, like son.
a little bit, but believe me, he's the master. I'm just the student.
Nice. My dad is like actually doing like stuff outside, some like construction outside. It was like getting a little bit loud, so I have to like make sure like all the windows are closed, all the doors are closed, so no noise gets inside here.
Hmm. Yeah, I understand.
Being like a jack of all trades, is that like something that you have within you other than like educating?
I think so. I mean, yeah, I think that it's manifested in a way that's different than my father, who's like a hands-on, has always worked in the area of labor of some sort. When he was a kid, he was a mechanic. Like, he fixed cars, and then he was a machinist for many years. And so he was, with his hands. With me, it's a little bit different, but it's, I guess, playing instruments is still with my hands. But the idea of being able to do a lot of different things, I do that in music. That's what I've found, you know. So I have a passion for jazz and the saxophone, but it's not the only instrument I play. I play the clarinet, I play the flute, and I also play classical music. I play pop music, and um, I think, professionally as a performer, I think people know that I'm capable of playing in a lot of different styles, which has given me a lot of different opportunities over the years. But so I love to teach, and I can teach different subjects. I also like to write. I write music for my own jazz quintet, and I've even been, I guess, speaking of hobbies, I've sort of been fooling around with um, uh, trying to write more like, I wouldn't say I'm writing pop songs per se, but kind of more like in the commercial music realm. I've been writing a little music using Logic on my MacBook, and kind of fooling around with that. So I do have the jack of all trades bug. It's just sort of like found its way into music and how I've lived in music for a lot of years.
That's great. Within like working in the music industry, if you have like a lot of skills, they kind of like go like across each other. Would you say you have any like conflicts of having a lot of interests?
No, absolutely. I mean, I have two guitars here that never get played, but yet I've dreamed my entire life of like being this great guitarist, but that's just never happened because I find myself busy enough that I don't really, have the sort of regular time it would take to learn the guitar like I've learned the saxophone. So I've just sort of accepted that. But those guitars will still sit there, and every once in a while I'll pick it up and plunk out a couple chords and it'll collect dust again. So yeah, it's, there are those kinds of yeah, conflicts where you keep wanting to do more things, but then when do you fit it in? Where do you find the time? And can you do those things without making the other things suffer? That's the other thing too, because once you're professionally doing something, you have to maintain those skills. You can't just completely put away the clarinet or the flute or the saxophone. You have to keep working on those things because it's not like riding a bike. It just isn't there for good. You have to maintain that. So
Right.
yeah, so I feel a little conflicted that way sometimes, but I try to keep a healthy perspective on it.
That's good. So pretty much people and like students know you as like an educator and all that, but you seem to like also have a career in like performing as well, working in like part of television media, working with musicians and artists. Um, would you like to tell us anything about it?
Oh, well, I for me that's sort of like the fun part of what I get to do. I mean, um, yeah, I've had a lot of really neat opportunities, both with just like performing and touring, but also then finding myself on television a few times. Um, but maybe I could give a little background here. Like when I moved to Los Angeles, I'm not from here. I'm from the Midwest, but I was in Texas before I moved here, working on my doctorate at the University of North Texas. And then I decided to move to Los Angeles because I was interested in the all of the music opportunities that were here. The first real sort of like exciting thing I remember doing was I was hired for a tour with Queen Latifah, this hip hop artist from back in the day, and but she had recorded a record. It was her second record of recording like jazz standards and R&B tunes, and so we went on this 4-month tour, and that was first time I was like on a road tour, especially with somebody of that sort of like renown, and then we did television. We did the Ellen DeGeneres show, and we did the Tonight Show band, and for me it was the Tonight Show when it was Jay Leno. For me, that was a dream come true. Like I thought someday if I could just be on that show, I always wanted to play in the house band for it as well. But I thought, man, if I could just be on that show, I would really have done something. Of course, and there I was, playing in her band, and my family back home was seeing it, and it was really kind of an exciting thing. And I realized that I kind of like that. So it's led to some other things I've done. Other shows like a show that used to be on called The X Factor, where they hired a bunch of extra musicians to. They called it Big Band Week, and all of the contestants on the show were singing songs that kind of came out of that era. A couple years ago, one of the last things I did on TV was um, it was like a promo for The Voice, um, and they ran that, and it was sort of like in a lounge. Looked like it was a lounge with this jazz big band playing. So I've had a few opportunities to be on TV, and I think I like the challenge and the pressure of working in those situations. I mean, everyone is different. The promo for The Voice was shot in many takes, and so it was almost like doing scenes of a TV show. Um, but when I did the X Factor, that's the one I really liked because we were actually playing live music on a live TV show. And so when it would be a commercial break, we're sitting there on the edge of our chairs waiting for this red light to turn green, and we have to just start playing when the conductor goes like this, because it's just happening in real time, and it was really intense, and I loved it. I loved the idea that you could sort of have that kind of anxiety and perform and not make a mistake in that moment. To me felt like a sort of validation of the 25 plus years I had put into music up to that point, learning how to play the instrument and how to do it well. So, um, you know, so I do have the opportunity to do those things. And I think, even more than those, I record music that finds its way into commercials on TV or TV shows, or um, I even was I got to play some soprano sax that made its way into a Will Ferrell movie a couple of years ago. And for me, those are really exciting too. It's just opportunities that, when I was younger, I never could have imagined I would be doing those things. And I'm still striving to do more of that stuff and enjoying every one of those opportunities that comes along. And I try to share those things with my students maybe a little more often now. I used to kind of just keep that stuff a little more secret because I didn't want to seem like I was bragging or something. But there is a part of me that has sort of come to accept that and is more willing to share it with the students in the spirit of there's this other part of me that you don't get to see here at Cal Poly, and I want to share those stories and those experiences that I've had in those moments. I want to share that with you because just like showing you how to play the saxophone is valuable to you when you're studying the saxophone, so is telling you what the pressure of being on a live television show is like in case you are in that position to have to perform, at the drop of a dime or a green light, and be able to do that job perfectly as well. And just some of the kind of fun stories that come out of those. I remember that when we were on tour with Queen Latifah, we played the American Music Awards, and I'd never been around like Hollywood or that many famous people in my life. And there we are standing on the wing of the stage, waiting for our turn to go out and get set up. And at that moment, Mary J. Blige is performing on stage before us, and then waiting in the wings with us to present the next award in between performances was Snoop Dogg and Beyonce. And I just sat there thinking to myself, looking around, like, I mean, is this really happening? This seems like it's not real. This could be a dream. But so I like to kind of share I guess maybe the joy of those moments with my students in hopes that maybe someday they'll find their opportunities to find that kind of joy in what they're doing, whatever it be.
Wow, that's like one performing career right there.
Well, the funny thing is that it's just like a small snapshot of a lot of the other musicians that I work with here in Los Angeles who've been out here doing it for 20 years longer than myself. They have stories. I mean, and I'm fortunate to work with them, but some of these musicians are the ones that are doing it all the time, every day, and it's amazing. It's amazing to be around them and learn from them.
Hmm. What would be like an unfavorable experience you had?
Oh, uh, well, I mean, there's always some moments where you wish you could take it back, you know. Um, I had a tour once, and I won't say what it was for, but um, you know, sometimes you get asked to do things that are a little bit out of your wheelhouse, and uh, you just say yes and then figure out how to do it. And this gig required that I play an instrument that I was not really that familiar with, and in fact didn't even own that instrument. But I said yes to it. And then we got into rehearsals, and the musical director noticed that I wasn't really sounding like somebody who knew that instrument very well. And after 2 days of me kind of fumbling through this solo that I had to play, he kind of stopped the band, and in front of the whole band, he said to me, "Hey, man, that's got to be better. That doesn't sound very good, and it's just got to be better." And he's saying this to a grown adult. It wasn't like I was a student in college. You're taking some real, real criticism in that moment. And my response was, "It will be better." And every night after we were in 2 weeks of rehearsals, and they were like 8-hour rehearsal days. I would go home, I'd grab a bite to eat, and I would stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning practicing that instrument. So by the end of that 2 weeks, I sounded good enough that I wasn't getting any more bad stares. And then from the musical director, and then when I was on the road, every chance I got, I was practicing that instrument because it was the weakest link. And it was a little bit of a lesson for me to be careful not to bite off more than you can chew, and also just to in anticipation of those kind of opportunities, uh, do a little better preparation. Like get your act together more outside of any gig. So whatever gig that is, you're more prepared for any gig that comes along.
I feel like an experience like this could like discourage a musician from like continuing playing or developing or like to continue practice becoming better.
It's true, and that I think that's part of the music business, that sometimes people do struggle with. They have a hard time with that. Um, it can be really hard to hear that honest criticism. You know, and sometimes we feel more comfortable in the place of, no, don't worry about it. That sounds pretty good. You just keep working on it, keep working on it. And you'll get there someday. But sometimes that someday arrives, and you actually have to do it. And that can be a hard lesson for people learning, and can be very discouraging. I'm sure that there have been many musicians who get defeated by that sort of thing. I remember how bad I felt in that moment, and I just told myself, I'm not going to find myself here again, and I'm not going to let this defeat me. I'm going to rise. I'm going to meet this challenge, and I'm going to face every challenge that way. And I don't know if that's just something that sort of you know maybe something I learned from my parents. My mom and dad were both incredibly hard, workers. They worked their entire lives, and so maybe that's something I got from them as well. But I think also when I moved to Los Angeles, I was very determined. I was determined to do whatever it took to survive and succeed playing music. And so in that moment, while my feelings were maybe a little bit hurt, I realized this is what I need to do to succeed in this moment, and I'm going to rise. But I think that we are, to be honest with you, I think that as performers, we're better served by getting that criticism more directly, and the sooner the better. You know, because it's out there. It's like you can't protect yourself or anybody from receiving that kind of criticism. It's just good. It's going to happen to everybody at some point. And it's better to find out whether you can take it or not. It's better to learn that that you're maybe not cut out for it, or you are. And sometimes I know I get some feedback from my students once in a while that hey, you were pretty direct about that, or you're kind of being hard. Hard. It seems like you have really hard expectations. And I'm like, well, yeah, because that's the real world, and I'm trying to not only teach you about music, but I want to teach you how to survive in the real world. And that's what it's like.
Our guest has really good advice. It's a lot of like perseverance within being a musician in the music industry as well.
Yeah, but you can apply that philosophy to whatever you do. I mean, for example, a lot of my students are music education majors. They're going to get out of here and they're going to go teach elementary music or secondary, maybe a high school band director, um, and those jobs aren't easy. And you have bosses that you answer to, and sometimes they're going to be upset and they're going to tell you something you don't want to hear. And how are you going to respond to that? You're going to respond to it by rising, like learning from that moment and letting it fuel you to do more and do better and continue to work towards achieving every goal and hope that you ever had and dream you ever had, and not be defeated by it. And that goes for any field. I think those are good lessons to live by. Got to dust yourself off and get back, get off the mat and get back to it.
Fall down 6 times, stand up 8. Oh, I can't do math.
There you go. Me neither. That's why I'm playing music.
Well, we're here.
That's right. We're doing this pretty well, so I'm okay with that.
Yes. So for any musician wanting to do like gigs that deals with like television and media or with like touring artists, what advice would you give them if you would want to like add more to that?
I would say that it, like, if that's what you desire to do, if that's your hope to do that kind of work, you have to search out the people who do it, and you have to meet them and you have to ask them questions. You have to be curious. I tell this to my students quite often, is that you have to embrace your curiosity. If you want to play music and you want to succeed at it, you have to be curious about it, because I can't possibly teach you everything you need to know about what you want to do. You have to go ask the people who actually do that for a living. And so that was what I did. I mean, when I first got here to Los Angeles, I had done enough research that I knew who the working saxophonists were in town who did various different sorts of things. And I made a short list and I said, okay, I am going to, one way or another, I'm going to search out these people and I'm going to try to meet them and talk to them. It was never about meeting them so I could ask them for a job. It had nothing to do with it. I wanted to find out from them, just like being a student in a university. I wanted to study what they had done and how they got there so that I knew how to better direct my path, And, one of those people was Ralph Moore. Ralph Moore is a brilliant saxophonist, and he was on the Tonight Show band when it was um, directed by Kevin Eubanks, the guitarist for all those years on the Jay Leno Show. And so I found Ralph Moore's phone number in the Union phone book directory, and I called his number. And back then, this is in the mid 2000s, a lot of the people in the Union book still had their answering service numbers. So it wasn't like their home number; it was some digital voice mailbox. And so I over the course of 6 months, I probably left 4 or 5 different voicemails on Ralph's answering service, because I wanted to talk to him about what it was like playing on a late night TV band. I mean, come on, that's incredible, And plus, he was a lifelong veteran of the New York jazz scene. This guy had worked with legends like Art Blakey and Horace Silver, and so I also wanted to talk to him about working with those caliber jazz musicians. And then what was that transition like from moving from New York, where you're playing jazz gigs all the time, to all of a sudden you're in Hollywood and you got a steady nightly gig, on a TV show. So I kind of want to talk to him about those things. And finally I got a call back from him, and he was like, hey, I think you've left a lot of messages, and what can I do for you? And when I explained to him that I was just genuinely interested in talking to him about those experiences, he said, well, let's have coffee. And that turned into hanging out, having coffee at a Starbucks for like 4 hours, and we just chatted and frankly, we got to be friends. We're friends now, and I am so pleased about that after all these years. So you got to search those people out. You have to find out and learn from their experiences. But also, if you want to be in that scene, you also need to be seen and heard by them. And that's one way that you start introducing that process.
Be seen within the scene.
And with music, then you also have to be heard within the scene. People have to find out what you're capable of doing, It's all part of the networking thing. We got to network a lot as artists in a working scene like this.
Yes. I was just gonna say that like it's always like networking that like comes to like haunt every one of us to just like survive in the music industry. Um with you, you brought in like being curious, and that is like definitely important too. It's more than just like meeting a person just to like add to your contact list and all that stuff. If you're like curious, it really does make a difference because it shows that you do like want to know more, you're more interested, and people will be seeing that.
You have to foster relationships. That's what it is. You have to foster relationships, and you have to feed those relationships with people. And as a society, we are sort of leaning towards more isolation all the time. I mean, we're on our devices all the time. We're more likely to communicate with somebody via text message rather than pick up the phone and actually call somebody. And but those things are how we make that human connection, and people find out we're sort of really genuine and genuinely interested. So yeah, it's something that it takes work, because I think for all of us it's something that we do less and less of all the time anyway.
Yeah, it can get exhausting, especially during this time, COVID, where we're all online and have like rare opportunities to meet people.
But I used to think about this a lot too, though. I've had friends who've like come here to this scene and left, and you know, even as easy as communicating with email, they just couldn't really even bring themselves to like send somebody an email. I mean, if I went and heard one of my idols play in town, I would go up to them on the set break or afterwards, and I would just say hi and hey, you sounded great, man. I can't wait to hear your music again, and then I might send them an email the next day and just say, just want to tell you again, your show last night was really fantastic. You know, and never in that stuff would I say, if you ever need somebody for a gig, call me. I would never say that stuff. I would just try to let this person know that I was interested in what they were doing, and eventually that those might open up those opportunities. Um, Networking is a big part of that. If you don't do it, those things don't happen.
Yes, yes. Let's move on towards like your time at Cal Poly. Now, you are an educator, you are a professor, you are a doctor.
Well, I don't have my doctorate. I didn't finish it, so that's someday
Oh,
to be determined. Maybe I never finished it at North Texas.
TBD.
That's right.
But you have been like teaching your peers as well, transitioning to this online environment because you've hosted the faculty recital weeks ago. I feel like you have been like making the effort to like kind of keep um the community as close. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, b- as we transitioned in the spring, we it was a pretty wild moment for all of us, and we were just sort of like doing whatever we could just to get you know just to get through the next week and make it to the end of the semester and try to make it feel like it was a valuable experience for everybody. But once that slowed down and I got to the summer, then I started to think about you know what's really important. Well, delivering the content is exceptionally important, but what's also important is the community aspect of it. I mean, one of the things that I enjoy the most about being on campus at Cal Poly is, number one, I love the walk from the parking lot to the building, because I never know who I'm going to see, what I'm going to encounter, and I love that part of it. But I also love walking by the couches in the music building, seeing the students. Uh, Sometimes they'll pull me into a conversation, or I'll tell a bad joke as I walk by. I'll leave my office door open a lot when I'm in there for office hours or just doing work, because if students want to walk by and say hello, or my fellow faculty members, I love the chance to stop and rap for a few minutes, and all of that stuff is because it's a community there. We're a campus community, but we're also a department community, and that that is part of what makes us enjoy being there. Both students and faculty. So I just started to think about, well, what were ways that we could kind of help to foster the idea of community. Now, there are a lot of the faculty members at Cal Poly who do perform. Sometimes they do their own recitals. They find different events, but I don't remember in recent years specifically a faculty concert. And I thought to myself, well, you know, if we're not playing for them, like, for these other opportunities that we might find on campus, how do the students really know what we're doing if part of what we do is performance? Not everybody is necessarily a performer per se on the faculty. I mean, I think we're all performers, but some of us aspire to want to do like public performances where maybe some others are doing have other focus area in music.
Mm.
um, and but I thought, well, for those of us who like to perform and like for our students to know what we do in that respect, wouldn't a faculty concert be a great way to bring people together, students and faculty, to sort of like demonstrate, even in this virtual world, there is this sense of community. We are together. We are in it together. And so, I emailed Dr. Yates about that over the summer, and he said that's a great idea. I think that's fantastic. I was thinking the same thing. He was already thinking about other ways that we could sort of foster community within the department. And so I just said I would be happy to sort of spearhead that, and ended up having to put it together.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. I feel like a faculty recital is like a great way to like introduce yourselves to the music department. At my community college, we did have like a faculty recital like once a semester, and that's how I felt like it was like kind of a good way to like lean in and like getting to meet the other rest of the faculty. Since I was like a music major, you're just kind of like thrown like, oh, there's like all these like instructors and all that stuff, and you hear like their names like go around too, and which is what you learn more from the students than like meeting them. But I feel like a faculty recital is like a good way to introduce yourselves while you're able to like express yourselves, present yourself musically as well.
Well, maybe it's. I think we're going to learn a lot of things from this experience of being home and learning online. Uh, when we do return to studying on campus again, being on campus, it will happen. When we do that, maybe we'll learn some things from this experience, and maybe one of those things, would be to continue a tradition of a faculty concert. The nice thing about doing a faculty concert where lots of different faculty perform is that your own personal responsibility is short. You do like one number and you're good to go, versus like an entire recital where you have to prepare an hour and a half of music just all by yourself. So that's it makes it a lot more reasonable for faculty who are very busy teaching and with all of their other duties. So, but maybe there's also a way that in the spirit of community, it's not just about the performance, but it's actually about you know getting to know those faculty a little bit by them talking a little bit more about what they do before their performances, or maybe there's a reception afterwards or beforehand where you can just walk up to a faculty member and introduce yourself as a student and say, I'm not in any of your classes, but I just wanted to meet you. And I think that that's a great idea. And so maybe the distancing will sort of like make us think about creative ways where we could commune even more when we're back on campus. I like the sound of it. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I was just like wondering what like if there are like any projects that you're working on right now within like quarantine and being stuck.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, in the middle of the semester, I'm pretty entrenched in everything to do with teaching my classes. So and I would be the first to admit that this has created more work. I find myself having more to do delivering content this way. Part of that's because of the technology that we've adopted in the music department. to use in some of our classes, which has kind of forced me to become like an audio engineer for
Mm.
multiple classes. Um, so side projects, other not really per se, not at this moment. I think about what I'm going to do when we're out of this pandemic a little bit more, which is record another jazz album finally, and to do some other things, maybe even a classical album. And
Mm.
yeah, maybe I'm just sort of preparing for those things to happen eventually.
So you have like a music project. This project's called Project Popular. Would you like to talk about it?
Sure, I mean, that's just my jazz quintet that I've worked with uh, on and off for at least a decade now, more than a decade. And these are just musicians that I started getting together with around the year 2009, and I had worked with them all in various places. I had been in Los Angeles for about 4 years by that point, and we had worked together in various situations and stuff. And I had dreamed of recording a jazz album, and I was kind of interested in the idea of what many other jazz artists have always done was recording pop tunes, but doing jazz arrangements of them. So I mean that's where the name comes from. It's a project of arranging popular music for a jazz group. That's where I drew upon for the name Project Popular. And so we recorded an album in I think we released it in 2011, and on there I did some like arrangements of like Coldplay and Pearl Jam and Prince and Audio Slave, um, Soundgarden. But then what I also found is that by studying those songs and sort of like transcribing them and deconstructing them and working with them, then I found it sort of piquing my interest to write original music that was sort of in the wheelhouse. And so then I ended up coming up with this material that was sort of a balance of the two things for that album. And then over the last decade, we've continued to perform, and we recorded about a half of a record a couple of years ago, but I never got around to doing anything with it. It might be an EP someday, but at this point, I hope to just I have a ton of original material that's never been recorded, and I continue to write more. So we haven't performed much in the last few years because all of us are older and busier and doing other things too. But we're all still friends, and I know that there will still be interest in doing something with when we come back to it. But it was it's a project of love. It challenges me uh, continue uh, to improve at playing the saxophone, to continue to explore as an improviser. It challenges me as a composer, and I like those things about it, and I like being engaged in doing those things. So yeah, I look forward to doing that again.
Nice. I'm hoping for like another release. Yes,
I'm hoping too. So it will happen. It will happen. It takes time, but it will happen. The challenge too is that it's expensive.
that
you know,
too.
I mean, when I did my first record, I did not do any kind of a Kickstarter campaign or anything. I just saved and saved and saved my money, and it was a very in the world of jazz, it still costs money. I mean, it costs money. It's not like recording a pop record, but it was expensive, and it took a long time to save for it. And that probably also made it feel very gratifying for me, was knowing that I had saved all the money myself and finally had enough to do it, and we did it.
Would there be anything that you like to present to us, like a recording of something for the audience to listen to?
Okay, well, so the selection that you're going to hear is an original composition of mine. It's called "Song for Jewel." Jewel is my wife, so it was the first song that I composed that I had her in mind as a sort of dedication to her, and it has a funny subtitle, which is the original Sweet Tooth, because she's got a sweet tooth. So I sometimes call her the original Sweet Tooth. But it's just an original composition. I was kind of fooling around with this tune by this great jazz saxophonist, Sam Rivers. This song of his, which has kind of become a jazz standard, called Beatrice. And so I started kind of feeling out his chord changes, and then I was kind of hearing this other melody, and so I kind of eventually came up with this end result. So you're welcome to play this on the podcast. This is called Song for Jewel.
That was nice.
Cool. There you have it.
You're saying that this hasn't been like released?
No, it's unreleased. Yep, that was we did that at a session a couple of summers ago, and with the intent was to finish out the record, and life just kind of steered me in another direction for a while. So the idea was always that we would come back and record another half of an album. I was hoping to actually record a bunch of songs with vocalists, because at various gigs over the years I've also featured a lot of different vocalists and done some pop tunes respun, in a jazz kind of way with these singers. So I was kind of hoping to record that, and maybe we'll get to that. But as an artist, you get far enough away from something, you're like, maybe I'm just gonna record something all new, because you always feel like when you record, it represents a snapshot of where you are creatively in that moment, in that time. But then, once it's been there, it's, in the rearview mirror for a couple of years, you think to yourself, well, I know I sound and write differently right now than I even did a couple of years ago. So do I want that to be the representation of what I put out now, or do I want to do something new? So I don't know. I haven't really decided yet, but no, so that hasn't been released. That's from the archives at this point.
Interesting. Maybe we'll see this in a release in the future.
That will build some suspense. There you go.
What would be the dream jazz combo to perform with?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I suppose, like, historically, to perform with Miles Davis's group in the 1960s, which was Herbie Hancock and Tony Williams, Ron Carter. I mean, that would be a dream come true. But I don't know. There's a lot of modern jazz players right now who I really look up to and would love the opportunity to work with them someday. The drummer Brian Blade has been a favorite of mine for 20 years, and if I ever got the opportunity to share the stage with him and play, I would just be so thrilled beyond belief. So, but I could probably come up with a really long list. I don't know if there's one.
If there's a saxophonist or musician you would duet with, who would it be?
Oh man, I don't even know because the people that I look up to and idolize, I would be too afraid to record a record with them because they would sound so good. I would sound so bad in comparison. I mean, uh, Chris Potter is the who I consider like the greatest living saxophonist. If there was ever a chance to play with him, I would be thrilled, but it would be like a giant looking down upon a poodle. He's just like such an amazing saxophonist. So yeah, but I mean, I'm lucky that there are really amazing players who I also look up to here in Los Angeles that I do get to work with. Occasionally, people like Bob Shepard and other saxophonists who are just world class musicians, and so I have nothing to complain about. I'm very lucky.
So this is a question like definitely for me. So I'm not a saxophonist, but I was just like wondering like what would be like the difference between like jazz saxophone and classical saxophone. If I can recall, the saxophone was like originally intended to be an instrument made for the orchestra, but over the years, it just like got its way into jazz.
Yeah, I mean, Adolf Sax was the inventor of the instrument, and he was an instrument builder already. He had made brass instruments for the French military, I believe, and the saxophone kind of came out of things I think he was doing with regards to the bass clarinet and some other instruments, and then kind of developed this unique instrument of its own. Um, this happened right in the middle of the 1800s, and by that point, we're in the Romantic era. The symphony orchestra has been established now for a couple of hundred years. The instrumentation of the symphony orchestra has been established by that point, and so there wasn't necessarily like an opportunity, I think, for the saxophone to really be welcomed in as a member of the symphonic orchestra, even though great composers like Hector Berlioz did write for the instrument. Um, but that didn't mean that that the saxophone wasn't being used for music that would fall underneath that umbrella of classical style music. There were composers who wrote for it. There were great pioneers of the instrument like Sigurd Rascher and Marcel Muehl, who after the turn of the century, they would go around to composers and demonstrate what they could do on the instrument, and they would write that kind of repertoire. So I suppose one of the differences is that to play classical music and also in an ensemble requires like sort of one kind of a sound concept and skill set. To play jazz requires a different kind of a tonal concept and the need to be a skilled improviser. um, it would probably bore people to get too much deeper than that into it, but the saxophone finds its way into jazz in the you could probably say in the teens or 20s as early jazz groups where they at one point, talking about like early jazz in New Orleans at the turn of the century, they were based on the instrumentation of pre-existing brass marching bands from military regiments, really. So they were using the instruments that would have been found in those, or in classical music. Clarinet was the reed instrument that was used in those early jazz groups. But as instruments became louder, as the drum set was utilized in that jazz ensemble, and as certainly as amplification and also developments like in the trumpet made these all these instruments louder. What they came to understand was that the saxophone also could play pretty loud, and in theory can kind of play louder than the other reed instruments. Uh, so there's probably more to it than that, but that in a nutshell, that's kind of how jazz sort of ends up, or a saxophone ends up taking over the sort of like primary reed instrument of jazz, and and once that happened, it sort of happens serendipitously at the same time that jazz is catapulted into being America's dance music in the swing era, and
Mm.
that really kind of helps like cement the saxophone's acceptance on a wide scale in commercial music, where like classical saxophone is primarily a chamber ensemble, meaning like solo, duo, quartet kind of a niche in classical music, but not a part of like the sort of like idea of the symphonic orchestra. Although, you know, if you go to a Pops concert, if you went and saw the LA Phil playing the music of Gershwin, Cole Porter, those Tin Pan Alley composers, they will bring in a saxophone section oftentimes for that music, which a lot of that was composed and orchestrated in the 20s and 30s, after the saxophone had become really popular because of its usage in jazz.
It's quite of an evolution.
It's a neat story. I mean, it is a neat story, and you know, it's one of the, as far as acoustic instruments go, it's one of the most modern. It's you know, it was Adolf Sachs had a lot of other woodwind instruments to study, and a lot of modernization had already happened on them, that when he built that instrument, he was very well informed on how to make an instrument that could be uh, you know, relatively ergonomically easy to play, but also capable of doing so much. He got it. He figured it out, and we were provided with this instrument that, of course, it continued to develop with the companies that manufactured it and the artists that played it, you know, over time. But basically, what we play today is still pretty much an Adolf Sachs saxophone, and it's an amazing instrument.
What's next for you? How does the future look like?
I mean, I'm just sort of like continuing to do what I do, but expand what I do. You know, this last summer, I became the um, like the jazz program director for a summer music camp that I teach, and I've been on the faculty of that camp for about 10 years. It's in northern Wisconsin. Because of the pandemic, we offered that class in this format for the first time ever, and this happened to happen at the same time as my longtime friend and one of my first saxophone teachers was the jazz director of this program, was ready to retire from that position. So I became the person this last summer, and I'm the person moving forward. So uh, I'm excited about pursuing what opportunities that opens up for me, being a sort of creative director of a camp, and how that might be something that parlays into other opportunities in my life here, and not just in northern Wisconsin. And that's something that I really haven't done much of before. You know, I mean, I've focused on teaching, playing, teaching, playing, and this is sort of like a creative director kind of a position, and I'm really excited about it. So, you know, I see myself sort of continuing to do the same sorts of things that I do. I just hope that I get to do uh, more of all of it. I'm not slowing down, that's for sure. I'm not slowing down.
Is this camp like open to like saxophone players or any other
Oh,
musicians?
it's a this is a jazz ensemble camp. Yeah. So when we do it in person in Wisconsin, we have all the instruments of big bands. So you're talking about trumpets, trombones, saxophones, and all of your rhythm section instruments: drums, bass, piano, guitars. And we usually have enough students each week to put together about 4 20-piece big bands. And we do 2 weeks of it. So we do a different group of students for the second week. And we have a blast. And this camp in Wisconsin is the Shell Lake Arts Center, and they've been hosting jazz camps there in this tiny little lakeside community in the middle of nowhere for over 50 years now. So it's really cool to be a part of it, you know. And yeah, we get to work with all those instruments. We have rehearsals for the bands, but then we also have like improvisation classes and listening classes. Um, so we sort of like have a pretty exciting program, and the students tend to have a pretty good time. They're making friends as well because they come from all over the place.
Wow. With this summer being like retro, it must have been like pretty experimental.
We were in uncharted territory, just like we were at Cal Poly when we switched to going online. We were just in uncharted territory, you know. And but you know, I was able to utilize some of the technology that we had learned for Cal Poly, or that I had, you know, sort of got hip to, and I used it for the camp as well. And we're using it now. This online digital audio workstation called Soundtrap. So we've been using that to record students both as a way to sort of represent their final product of what they've been working on, but also as a teaching tool, a way to give feedback in rehearsals and on week to week too. So we used that for the camp and had great success with it. And you know that the art center doesn't normally operate like during the winter months of the year. It's a summer program series, but the camp, the arts center, and the board of directors was so excited about what we come up with that in February it looks like I'm going to be offering like a small version of it, an honors high school jazz camp in the virtual format to high school students from Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Hmm.
So yeah, so some good things have happened from all this.
Would you care to explain the title of like this program again to the audience?
Yeah, it's called soundtrap.com. It's a digital audio workstation. So for anybody who's had any experience recording from home, they might be already familiar with using something like GarageBand on an Apple computer, or Logic, or Pro Tools, or um, Ableton Live, you know, some of these other digital audio workstations. Well, in this case, it happens to be on your internet browser, and all the information is stored in the cloud. So you and I can be recording on a project. We can't do it in real time together, but still, we can both be logged into this project at the same time. And let's say I'm the drummer, so I record 16 bars of the rhythm, 16 measures for this song. I'm like, okay, cool. Henry, you're the bass player. Now I got that recorded. Boom, it's recorded. You refresh your page. Boom, it's there. You lay down your bass line. Boom, save it. Boom. Okay, I refresh my page. Now I got the bass groove in there. I'm going to call up my buddy in Miami. I'm going to say, hey man, can you take a ride on a piano solo over the top of this groove we got going on? Well, we can do the same thing, you know, from all of our little corners of California, wherever we're at right now, and do that something similar. And we don't have to share files via email or Dropbox or anything because everything is saved on the website in the cloud.
Yes. And the name of the camp.
Oh well, the camp in Wisconsin where I used that, but also we're using it with Cal Poly. That is the Shell Lake Arts Center in Shell Lake, Wisconsin.
Okay. It's been a nice discussion with you. Do you have any closing remarks for the audience?
I guess maybe I would just try to encourage everybody to stay positive, stay diligent in keeping yourselves safe. Um, and if you're watching this podcast, or listening to this podcast, I hope that it's in part because you are just interested in music and the arts, and know that those things are necessary in our lives, especially at times like this. They get us through the most difficult of times. So rely on your favorite music and your favorite art in this time, and support it now, and support it when we're back to normal as well. Because we need the support, and we all need art in our life.
Yes, definitely. Is there like any social media that you have?
Sure. People can follow me on Instagram. I'm on there as Project Popular Band, I believe is my Instagram moniker. And there's also a Project Popular Band page on Facebook as well.
All right.
I'd be happy to pick up a few followers.
This is definitely your promo right here.
That's
Project
right.
Popular Band on Instagram and on Facebook.
That's great. I'll take it. Well, it's been a real pleasure, Henry. Thanks for asking me to do this, and it's been nice to talk to you. And yeah, I think this is great what you're doing, and I was really glad to be a part of it.
I'm glad that you're here, getting to know more about you. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in.